today I wanted to share something with you that I think is it's a very valuable message that a lot of us, maybe we don't take time to think of it, but maybe we hear different messages about it. And just wanted to talk about emotions and this book in particular. It is called The Wisdom of Your Heart. I know it'll probably be backwards online. Discovering the God-given power and purpose of your emotions. This is written by Pastor Mark Shelsky. And I did an interview with Pastor Mark in, I don't know why I keep calling him Pastor Mark, but anyway, I did an interview with him on YouTube, and it's a really fabulous interview. He talks about some of the things in this book that are super helpful for us as Christians and believers, and some of the things that we struggle with in our spiritual growth because we choose to ignore, or we believe that we need to ignore our emotions, and especially the ones that we tend to call negative emotions, as he talked to me about in the interview, the ones that are really more difficult, like anger and fear. Really, if we have a chance to understand what's going on with our emotions and the fact that they're actually informing us and telling us something about the state of our inner world, we will not only learn more about ourselves, but about God, because God is the giver of emotions. He is a God who has emotions. They all come from him. And so when we understand the power and the purpose of those emotions, we actually have an opportunity for God to be transforming us in our hearts. So what is it that anger is causing us to... why are we having an angry reaction, for example? But one of the things that Mark talks about in this book is the way that emotions prompt us to act in some way. So we will often hear a phrase, your emotions aren't telling you the truth. Feelings are liars. And I see this, and I have to cringe, and I probably have a dissenting opinion to some people on this, and here's why. If we just go to this root phrase saying your emotions are liars and your feelings are liars, what that does to me as a believer is it says, oh, I better not have any grandiose emotions. Maybe I need to be kind of flat emotionally, or I need to definitely don't need to be angry. I definitely should never feel fear. And I feel this weight and a burden as a Christian that you should not ever have fear or anger or jealousy or let's see, what are some of the other ones? Well, anyway, you know what I'm saying. You know those times when somebody quickly responds to you and says, oh, don't be afraid. God says don't be afraid. Well, yes, he does. He absolutely does. But if we just stop there, we miss out on so much of what God means for us and how he helps us walk through the fear. And he's not telling us don't ever experience that emotion, shut it down. He knows that we have those fears, and he provides help for us and hope for us. So what I wanted to talk about in the book here and in the interview, Mark talks about some primary things. In the beginning, he shares some of his story, which really resonated with me because I'm familiar with, yes, it's okay when we have emotions. Absolutely. Thank you, Valerie and Tiffany. He shares part of his story, and the reason it resonated with me because one of the first things he talked about was Peter Scazzero and his book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And Pete Scazzero contends that you cannot be, I'm probably going to not say the phrase correctly, but you can look it up, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. You cannot be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. So what does that mean? If we never deal with emotions that we actually have, and we pretend like we don't have them and just try to make ourselves have what we think is the better emotions, that's not emotional maturity. That is like faking it. It is pretending. It is putting our false self out there, and it's actually wreaking havoc in ourselves, in our lives, in our souls. And we're going to struggle with God even more. We're going to struggle with who we are. We're going to have an internal, like a cognitive dissonance when you think that you should be behaving one way, but you really feel differently on the inside. And those things are resolved at the feet of Jesus. Yes, it is wearing a mask. So it's important for us to understand that emotions are okay. They're not sinful in and of themselves. And if we say feelings are liars and emotions are liars, what are we really saying? We're saying don't trust the fact that you have fear or anger, because that's usually what they're talking about, sadness and those types of things, and leaving you with only happiness as an emotion. That's not healthy Christianity. It's not real life for anybody. Nobody is happy all the time, and Jesus wasn't happy all the time. We know the simple verse, Jesus wept. We know that he got angry in the temple. He experienced different emotions. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. So going back to the parts of the book, again, in this book, The Wisdom of Your Heart, Discovering the God-Given Power and Purpose of Your Emotions, Mark talks about his struggle as a pastor and kind of coming face-to-face with the things that he hadn't been dealing with and how it impacted his life personally. He talks about the emotional maps, things that we kind of learned early on in our lives about emotions and how to handle emotions in our lives, and 4 myths about emotions. And so I have to tell you, to be honest, though, and I mentioned this in the blog post, that when I saw the title of his book first, The Wisdom of Your Heart, I thought, I don't know, the heart's deceitful, and we shouldn't be trusting it. So even though I had this in the back of my mind that emotions aren't liars, that was the verse that immediately came to mind. And I almost didn't look at it any further. But then I read the subtitle, and it said, Discovering the God-Given Purpose and Power of Your Emotions. So this is why I love his book so much, because I've actually read a lot of books on emotional health. I'm working through becoming a life breakthrough coach, which I should be certified by the end of November. Yay, I'm excited for that. But in here, so I've read a lot of books, and he taught me so much. Some things in the beginning, he goes from the maps and the myths, but what he does is he takes those myths, why do we believe them? And throughout the book, he kind of expands further on about, thank you, Tiffany, what's actually happening. So he goes into some of the theology about emotions, and then he also goes into the brain science about emotions. And in the brain science section, I think it's in there, like the GPS of your emotions, he talks about what the actual response is. So like our immediate emotional response isn't, there's nothing that we can do about that immediate emotional reaction. There's actually those what do they call it? Microfacial expressions that happen automatically in our body when we're triggered with an emotion of some kind, so fear, anger, whatever. That's not something that we're in control of at that point. That's just naturally happening. And so he talks about that process and kind of breaks it down. So when is it something that's actually becoming, for me as a life coach, I think about this. I think about more of the when does it become the choice, and what is it that we're actually listening to in the tapes that we're playing in our head. So the emotion, though, itself can tell us a whole lot. And when we can go back and spend time with God and understand that emotion for ourselves, we can understand maybe there's some underlying incident that happened, or maybe we're having trouble trusting God, and he's challenging us to take a step towards him through that fear. I don't know what it is, but that's one of the reasons that I created the Unleash Heart and Soul care sheets, is so that we can, 1, grow in the presence of God, but 2, to kind of work through those things that get stirred up, identify the thoughts that we're having and the feelings that we're experiencing, and then laying it before the Holy Spirit and asking him to help us understand it. So Mark gives a whole bunch of information in here that is super, I was just like, I had it on my Kindle and I wanted to highlight like crazy. So now I'm having my paperback copy I'm going to go back to and highlight all kinds of content in there. And guess what? You can do that too, because on the blog, I have a giveaway. Mark is giving away 2 copies to my readers of this book. It is on the blog under the post. So if you just go to JoleneUnderwood.com. Hey, good morning, Bobby. You can go to JoleneUnderwood.com. The first blog post is Emotions Are Liars, or Are Your Emotions Lying to You, I think is what it's called. And there's a giveaway thing towards the end. There's an audio and a video version of the interview that I did with Mark. And I want to make the audio available because I know it's hard to sit there for a long YouTube video. But I'm telling you, it's worth it, the information that he has to share, and really the freedom that comes when we realize it's okay to have these emotions, and the freedom that comes from the transformation that happens. Thank you for sharing the link there, Tiffany. Transformation happens when we let God work in our lives. So like if we're saying emotions are lying to us, we're kind of saying, stop, God. We have emotions, but I would kind of take it as it feels sinful, and God, I have to fix this. But if we actually take time to listen to how our emotions, what they're informing us of, we get an opportunity to lay that before the Holy Spirit and ask God to speak to our hearts and let him work in our hearts so that we are growing closer to him, so that we see more of who he is, and we become more effective for the kingdom because his light is shining through us, and we're not hidden with all these walls and these masks and these chains of trying to pretend like we don't actually ever feel fear or sadness. Okay, so I'm probably getting sidetracked because I do that a lot. I'm going to have to start taking notes when I do videos. But I did want to hop on today and just share this book again with you and hope that you will enter the giveaway and that you will share it with others that you know personally in messages, forward the email. I'll be sending out the blog post follow-up email on my newsletter later today. So if you haven't signed up, you can go ahead and do that today, and I will send that out, and then you could forward that to anybody that you think would be interested in winning this book. It's just really powerful, and I think you'll enjoy the YouTube video as well. And if you guys have questions, I'm looking forward to doing more in the realm of emotional health, life breakthrough coaching, and specifically some practical steps that we can, practical and spiritual application of how emotional health ties to our spiritual growth, how we can persevere in our faith. And so coming on the blog, you're going to find more and more content from me that specifically talks about why I say cultivate a life well lived. What does that mean, and how does it impact our lives as believers to learn how the power that we have in making choices, and just leaning into God with our emotions and those types of things. So a lot more coming up. I look forward to hearing from you. I would love to hear your feedback, your comments, your questions, any of it. And I know Mark would be happy to answer as well. And hey, Mark is here. So sorry I didn't give you a heads up that I was going to do this Facebook Live video. But anyway, I would love to have your questions and your feedback. We'll talk to you guys soon.